Do OV patterns matter in min-masters? For sure. I think, yeah. I think OV patterns always matter because they definitely have impact on like what you see and how you see things. But also it's like a really easy thing that everyone can do that just creates a foundation for how you operate. Let's talk about Overlord patterns in StarCraft just in general. I'm gonna give this a crack. I'm gonna try to go by each matchup one by one. Let's start with ZVZ first. With ZVZ, there's really all you're looking for is units coming across the map. So in this case, on pillars, it's more this, right? It's kind of a wave. So naturally your first OV will see as long as you're in this area. But the spooky thing about ZVZ is when they do side routes. And 12-pole drone pull, you really don't need to worry about big detours, because if it's detoured by that much, it'll be kind of useless. It's like not really that scary anymore. It's these little ones that are trickier. So generally what we'll do when we do Overlord patterns is we'll make a decision like, okay, I'm gonna have my first OV just go straight to their base, right across the middle. And then the second one will check for detours, and then we'll go to the third base. We want kind of a multi-purposed second OV, right? So that's like a super simple idea, because what is this covering? This is covering the one right through the middle, 12-pool drone pools, straight edge shit. But this one over here is checking for 13-12, sneaking around, maybe even a 12-pool drone pool sneaking around a little bit, but probably not. Probably this one's gonna catch most of it, right? Now, there will always be a problem with a side that you didn't cover. This is kind of the reality of ZVZ, in that there's always something that you can't cover. But we make these decisions knowing this is what we can't. This is the problem area. We know this because we chose these specific Overlord patterns, right? And this is really important to note, because when we decide to do these Overlord patterns and we know that they could go to the right, we know that if we do know, like say if we're in a tournament and we do know that someone does something like this, we can account for it and we can check, you know, does it go to the right, does it go to the left? If you don't know, maybe you put down an earlier pool, stuff like that. But in ladder, we can only do 2 out of 3. That's the best we could hope for in StarCraft most of the time for ZVZ, unfortunately. And there's a lot of variations of this, like you could do like straight down the middle, and the second one goes over here. Same thing, just mirrored basically, and then you have to worry about this detour, and it's all the same stuff in the end. That's pretty much ZVZ in a nutshell. And then from there, you always want the first OV right here outside the base, checking the vision of the nat ramp. And the second one, you generally want wherever you think the third's going to be. So let's say this is where the third is, and you see in this area. And then eventually we detour. So then we retreat back here, boom, boom. I'll clean this up so it looks super nice. So then once they establish 3 base, then all we're trying to do is just keep vision. We're just trying to keep tabs on all the places that they are, while also being safe. And you will want the same Overlord patterns for yourself, but on your side of the map. Oh wait, we should do that different color. This will be Overlord. So you'll want your Overlord here, here, and then here. But we're checking in a different way, right? We're checking on the outer rings, right? Same exact idea. We want to see anything coming in and out ahead of time. We don't want our overlords like in between our bases. We want them very far out while also keeping tabs on all the different corners, right? Just like these are keeping tabs on all the stuff that comes out of his base while also being safe to queens and stuff like that. This is a very like tight 4 OV setup that like literally everyone has, this box of overlords. You'll see this in every pro game. And then from there's like a couple different ways you can play the rest of the OVs. It doesn't really matter too much. Like maybe like I go 2 base meta, so I might want an overlord in my main to check stuff there. Or maybe I'm wanting to get more tabs on the middle, so I'll just have on pillars, stuff like that. And then eventually those will become patrol overlords if you're playing like roaches or something like that. But the rest really don't matter as much, and you wouldn't really want to have more than like 6, maybe 8 absolute maximum. If you know you have no worries of mutas, you'd have them in the middle and then like here. And we're covering all the key points, right? Super simple. ZVZ overlord patterns are super duper simple. Is there anything else that we could do with ZVZ? I don't think there's anything else for ZVZ. ZVZ is super straightforward. So let's go into ZVT. The thing with ZVT overlord patterns is as far as like getting there, it's pretty much just being safe versus proxy raxes. And the days of getting sniped by a Marine first are pretty much over. I remember there being maps like 2-3 years ago where you'd have to do really elaborate overlord patterns to get across the map. But these days, like as you can see, oh my god, that's a huge thing. As you can see, they're pretty big. Boom, boom, boom. We got overlord spots for days. I think this might even be one. No, I don't think it is. Oh my god, we're so safe. So we don't really have to worry about getting there. It's pretty much just seeing proxy raxes and stuff like that. So because we're worried about proxy raxes and we're not really worried about Marine first snipes, what are the different ways we can cover ourselves versus proxy raxes? A very popular way is just sending your overlord straight across, nowhere in particular, whether you're going to the main, to the pillar, doesn't really matter, we're just going across. And the second one checks some area and then we're moving over, right? Kind of similar to checking for 1312s and stuff like that. First one kind of covers the middle, then the second one checks the sides. This is like a pretty middle of the road. It has potential to find stuff. It could also miss stuff because whichever side you don't choose, like if you just do the top left, you could very easily miss something on the bottom right. But while I think, man, do people do this as much anymore? I feel like this is like a really old way of doing it. But the way I used to do it is I would send my first OV like so along the side, and then my second OV would be checking the corners. So you're essentially checking both corners. And it would turn into this weird situation where the only place they could proxy rax you is right in the middle. And then that turned into a vicious 50-50 of like, do they check all the corners or just one corner in the middle or in which corner? And then it's just this vicious coin flip battle. The problem is, no matter what you do, unless you drone scout, there's always going to be a spot that's open. So, you do this, there, we're vulnerable to this. This is a very classic spot to check. So, you can always, and then we could do this forever. Like, oh, so then that means we'll do this. But then what if we're back here? Or what if we're on the edge of here? And you shouldn't worry too far. After a certain point, when we get into the territory, like in these territories, it becomes a lot less effective to really matter. Which is why I think a lot of people, when they do Overlord Scout, we're really focusing on the middle the most. Because if you miss the middle, it's absolute doomsday. For example, if they're in this corner, in this pocket, and you check the sides, it's way, way, way worse than if they're out in the outskirts of like this area. Yeah, I wanted to circle in this area, right? All right, now I'm drawing way too much. So the highest priority should end up being like if I was going to tell someone how to Overlord Scout and they're having a lot of problems with proxies, I would give them something super tight like this. And then I would just give something like that. Or maybe I'd even not do the cut and I'd just say like go like that. And then we're just covering our middle. Ultimately, this is why you see drone scouting at the highest level in tournaments, because not only is 2 racks and cheeses like that really hard to defend when you're doing tournaments, but if you, for example, did the scout I was talking about earlier where you just check all the corners and then they were in the middle, which we've all seen proxy racks is here, then we're absolutely in doomsday. So you'll have something like this, and then we'll have a drone scout to go ahead and check over there, and then they'll go home, which I think is completely fine. If you're playing versus a lot of proxy racks, you should go for it. I don't think it's especially good, but if you're playing versus a lot of it, then that's just how it is. You should play accordingly to what you're playing on the ladder. And I think a lot of people are kind of weird about that, like, oh, you shouldn't have to drone scout, but if you're playing a lot of proxy racks, that's just how it is. So actually scouting the Terran, we have a couple options. Usually the second Overlord isn't doing a lot. It's usually kind of a backup in the form of like turning into an overseer, or maybe it's scouting like Hellion move outs, or maybe it's actually the one who is scouting the main. So there's a couple of ways we could do this. So for example, if first OV goes straight to the main, second OV could go over here and then be a spotter in the NAT. And we can do this in a couple different ways. It doesn't have to necessarily be super, super safe, but we could just park right over here. And then the first OV is going to be the one who ends up coming in, you know, the 3:30 scout, 4-minute scout, whatever you end up wanting to do for ZVT. This is the guy who's going to scout. And then the other one's just a spotter for any Hellions that are going in and out, which is a pretty consistent way of playing, right? But if, for example, let's reverse the order. First OV goes straight to the NAT, right? We want to see that CC timing, want to see what's going on. Second Overlord comes over here, checking for whatever proxy racks is, then comes right up. This guy is going to be the main scouter, while the first OV is going to be the one checking for, you know, any Hellion move outs. Maybe they'll see some depot timings and stuff like that, get some clues on what's going on. Either way, not a huge deal. It's just whether you want to send out 2 OVs or not. Because if you send out your first OV straight across to the main, this second one could hypothetically just never move out, and it's completely fine because you have this guy here. That's all that matters in the end. Having a guy in the NAT to scout is an optional situation. You do not need that unless you're really, really feeling a Ling run by, right? C4 Hellions move out, 6 Lings come in. It's the classic ZVT scenario. Besides that, like, there's really no reason for you to have a spotter all the time. And it really comes down to, okay, do I want a second OV on the map? If I do I want it in the main or do I want it in the NAT? And if I do have the second OV, or excuse me, if I do have the first OV in the main right here, I could not have it in the NAT on the pillar, or instead I could have it sitting in the corners. And this could be a second scout for mech and stuff like that, right? This is all really preference. There's a million ways to do it. And sometimes you can't keep everything covered. And sometimes you won't want to keep it covered. Just like how you might have an OV go to the straight to the main and scout. And you might not actually want a second OV on the pillar because you're worried about Vikings or something like that. That's a reason that you might not want both your OVs on the map. Because scouting from the NAT is kind of sketchy and like pretty map dependent, to be honest. You might not want your only OV be on the pillar. You know, you might want, if it's on the pillar, maybe you might want to move up and then go behind the NAT, because this is a pretty reliable way these days to get a main scout. Okay, I think that's pretty much, oh yeah, there is a problem with these maps. So I'll cover this in ZVP too, but these pillars are shit. I guess I can't show both of them at the same time. These are fake pillars, is what I like to call them. Because if they have a Hellion on this lip, then they can see most of this pillar. So you have to be, actually I think maybe all of the pillar, actually. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can see all of the pillar with the Hellion here. So what you need to do, if you're a big main scout guy or a NAT, or actually rather if you're a big NAT guy, instead of going straight here to your home, well allegedly your home, you need to start thinking about different options. Like for example here, and like going in and out, or a personal favorite of mine is sitting on this high ground and then bouncing between these 2 points. If you can go back and forth, you can kind of see what you need to see while still being on this high ground, which is really powerful because it's so long, and then you can go onto this high ground if you need to. But this pillar is effectively useless if you're playing somebody who knows that they can just get a Hellion to see vision. Any pillar that's next to a ramp like this is like this. So the main way of scouting on this map is you either go over here like you might on any map, or we still have our tried and trues. We can scout the mains. But if you're a NAT guy, you really want to think about parking here. Well, it would be more like here, and then you go home to your high ground. That's a little bit further, and then you're just kind of doing back and forth, check for CCs, check for depots, whatever you like to do. It's just a little bit more of a convoluted death aura. But yeah, besides that, it's pretty much fine. It's just a more convoluted death aura, and you need to know that this is not a safe pillar at all. And this also applies to This also applies to Jag, but unfortunately, Jag doesn't really have as cool of like high ground thing to rely on. This pillar is a fake pillar, and of course we have our tried and true main setups that are really nice, but we don't really have like a high ground to be safe with. This is all low ground here. So what ends up happening is these are like the safest pillars, but they're in Africa. They're completely useless. So if you're huge into the NAT pillar stuff and you want to be like actually safe, the most technically safe, you would really want to start considering doing some straight to main pillars, or not pillars, OVs, because it's just the best way right now. And I think knowing how to do both of these is good, whether it's coming from the back or just going straight to it is nice, because it's kind of, well, I mean, this is maybe not as important unless you're a tournament player, but it's nice to have mix-ups and stuff like that. If you're always going a certain place, maybe people will predict, and maybe they don't snipe your OV, but maybe they always know you're here, so they're always putting stuff back here. This is a little bit more higher level, maybe back here. Maybe not as applicable to most people, but it's something to definitely think about. And of course, all the Overlord, checking for proxy stuff goes. It's all the same. Yeah, it's all the same stuff. Okay, cool. So we got ZVP, the last one. Now we all know, like, You gotta keep your second OV home. You gotta, make sure no shenanigans are going on in any of the corners of your natural base. So it's really gonna be a lot about where the first OV is going. Like, are we checking for proxy gates and stuff? We're not really worried about proxy gates. Actually, proxy gates are pretty weak once you realize how to hold them. So it's pretty much just where do we put our first OV? And I think a lot of people will assume like, well, I mean, surely you go to the NAT, you have our comfy pillar. This is great. We can see the chrono boost. We can see, is he getting warp gate right away? Is he getting something else? These are all like tried and true staples of how to scout in ZVP, seeing this information at the NAT, seeing the wall. But on a lot of maps, you can actually, I think all but one, I can't actually quite remember what the one you can't do it on, but almost every map in this pool in ZVP, you can go ahead and just scout straight across and go to the dead space in the back, and you can't get hit by a stalker. And what this does is you get to see the tech that they make right away. You don't have to worry about when do they make the warp gate, where their chrono boost is going, yada yada. You just see Stargate, cool, or Twilight Council, cool. The only thing bad that can happen with this, actually there's two things that can happen that are bad with this, is once you're in the corner, you are in a vulnerable position because you don't know how many adepts are chrono boosted or whatnot in the natural. So you will either have to blindly make lings or just hope to God that you're not getting attacked. Or you could even say, fuck the cannon rush at the natural. I'm going straight to the nat with my second OV, and then you could just see it, which is another risk in itself. But what this basically does is it gets rid of a lot of like the question marks of like the 3 to 4 minute mark of Zerg. Is just, what are they going Oracle, or are they going this? You see everything right away. The only thing bad that can happen to this OV that's going straight to the main is if they go Stalker first, they can catch it, but if they don't, if they go Depth first, they'll have no choice but to let you watch all their tech. And then coming from the back, it's usually a pretty great rescout because you get to see main gases. Like if they're going Twilight Council into a Depth Prism, and then you scout their main gases and they're not mining as much as they might normally would, with, then you know, okay, it's not a DT follow-up. They're just doing a super tight Adept Prism because you normally mine with like 2 on each gas. Stuff like that, super handy. This is a pretty nice mix-up if you know someone doesn't go Stalker first a lot, and maybe you even know their tendencies on how much they go double Adept really fast or not, because you could either metagame that they are doing it or they aren't. So there's some cool stuff there. The big thing is the Adepts. If they go double Adept, you will have to go 8 lings per usual, all usual stuff. It's all the same defense. You'll just have to do it blindly, which some people will really hate and some people will be completely fine with. I previously, before realizing how scary Cannon Rush was, would send my first OV straight across, like I'm saying, and then send my second one across to check for the Adepts coming. And I was completely fine and safe, and I loved my life because I could see the Adepts coming and I scouted their first tech. But then I realized how bad Cannon Rush can be. So I'm a little bit hesitant these days to do something like that. So proceed with caution. This is kind of like a choose your own adventure of how you want to die, or maybe how you want to cut. I guess you could call it like the burden of not knowing what they're doing versus like the burden of making a couple extra units. You know, do you want to not know if they're making Adepts, or do you not want to know if they're making Stargate or Twilight Council? It's up to you. But I was surprised to hear that going straight to the main ZVP has become pretty popular in Korea, someone told me. So I guess they find that trade worth it, because I kind of questioned whether it was really worth it myself. Besides that, Nat OV in the Nat, of course. If you can get it across the map in a fair amount of time, you can do some cool shit where maybe, say, if you leave the Nat at like 130 and you get to his main base, you can use this Overlord to go into the main while threatening with Lings. If you're quick enough, you can threaten the Nat, so maybe if there's a Depth Stalker in the Nat and then he pulls a Stalker to deal with the main OV, you can kill that Adept in the wall. This is like a really popular way of dealing with Twilight Council on my stream. If you watch the latter streams, you'll definitely see a lot of me doing that. But besides that, if you have a slowpoke OV coming across the map, you know, a typical like 150 coming out of the Nat, we're pretty much just spotting for a depth. So we're going up here, and we're just kind of covering different area like that. So not a lot of exciting stuff to see there. And then, you know, of course, our defaults kind of end up looking like the defaults for ZVZ, you know, having one out here, and we're just kind of covering area. Same for ZVT too. You kind of just want to always have two OVs outside your bases covering area. That's just a generally good thing to do. And then if you know it's not Phoenix or Viking, even some of these on about. Actually, let's make these a little bit more bright so we can see some of these on about. Besides that, we do have the same pitfalls of the ZVT overlords on Oxide and Jag. Instead of a Hellion spotting this corner, it will be a Stalker. But actually, more realistically, it'll be an Adept, because the Stalker will be the one killing your Overlord on the low ground here, and it'll just be an Adept sitting here laughing at you. So what ends up happening is pretty similar, where you go over here and then you bounce between the rocks and the Nat to see what's going on. I think that's pretty cool. I think what's even better though is if you go up here and then sit in this little cubby. This cubby is pretty freaking safe. Of course, you can always go to the main. That's a fine place to go. And it's exactly the same for Jag, with this little cubby being, your safest spot, because this pillar is completely unsafe. You don't even need an Adept on here, actually. Same thing with ZVT. You don't need a Hellion up here. You just need anything that breathes. Another Marine, could be a Zealot. I don't think it can be a probe, can it? I'm not sure. But completely unsafe, and because these pillars are completely irrelevant, you will need to have your Overlord bouncing between this spot here, and then we'll just kind of, you know, back and forth checking for gases, which is a really nice spot for gases, by the way, and Chrono Boost. Or you could just go straight to the main and do what I was saying earlier, because that's totally viable on this spot. Yeah. And as far as whether you pull out your second OV to be out in the map too, like, you know, you sit here in your Nat for a while and then you go to the main base and your first OV's out in the natural. I think it's really nice versus Twilight Council, but if you're versus a Phoenix, you're gonna have a really hard time. So it's kind of up to you on that. I think similarly versus Terran, having your OV go from camping the Nat to just sitting in a corner for an Overseer Scout later, and then you morph and then you check out what's going on. Well, you know, for Terran it's checking for mech, for ZVP it's checking for Sky Toss, but it's the same exact idea. Layer finishes, get a really good idea of what's going on. And you could do that with Ling Scouting too, but that's kind of just been my very old way of doing it, so our old habits die hard, I guess you could say, in a lot of ways. But yeah, either way are good. I think that's it. There's not a lot else. You know, of course, you always want OVs outside, checking for vision. And then maybe you could even spread more if you know it's not a Phoenix. You can kind of get the corners like that, and then you wouldn't want much more than that. Yeah. I think that's it. Is there anything I missed, guys? Anything that pops out of you? I think we're good.